Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Afterglow Live Recap Podcast. My name is Syya.
And I'm Erin, Gregor.
We want to welcome a very special guest today, Dr. Angel Durr. She was actually a former guest of Erin and I's other podcast, Innovation Calling, about a year ago. And so we got introduced to, Dr. Durr with DataReady DFW, which we will talk about that in a second. But just want to say, I could not be more excited to have you and see you. It's been a year, Dr. Durr. Welcome back to a different podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So Global Leaders Organization, what are we recapping, you guys? GLO actually puts on a weekly speaker series, Business Acceleration 2.0, in partnership with LinkedIn to highlight a lot of business leaders who've been there, done that, but also for those that can give an extended advice. For folks like Erin and I with Innovation Media Enterprises, we are a startup, we're a new company. And, how can we take our business to the next level, both professionally as well as personally? So this week we welcomed Ami Kassar. And Ami Kassar is a noted, basically author and of The Growth Dilemma. So on that note, Dr. Durr Angel, welcome back. It's been a year. Talk to us about DataReady DFW. What are you guys and how's it going in this pandemic?
Hi. Well, I'm really glad to be here. First off, thank you for having me again. So I have a nonprofit, a very non-traditional nonprofit called DataReady DFW. And we are headquartered in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex digitally. So we're 100% digital as far as being a nonprofit, which is not as rare in the business world now post-COVID. But when we started, it was pretty rare for sure. So we're kind of innovators in this space in that we're working on innovation as a nonprofit and really trying to drive innovation and showcase the power of data for not just people that consider themselves data professionals, but for everyone to understand.
Very cool. So, with the pandemic and the adjustments that we've all made, have you seen that you have to, readjust or modify?
So for sure, we were already a digital nonprofit, so we didn't have to adjust in that way, but we definitely had to shift our business model a lot during COVID, like I think most people have had to do. We definitely had to consider how we were going to be finding our income streams, knowing that pre-COVID, we were working on a lot of heavy face-to-face projects and interactions. And that was kind of the nature of what we were doing before COVID, was that heavy engagement and interaction on a personal level, so that we could really understand kind of the business environment that we were working in and how we could best have an impact. And so post-COVID, our focus is working on projects that are scalable and innovative in order to really try to drive our message home in a way that really reaches a wide audience rather than focusing on those one-off interactions. And so that was definitely a shift, and we had to adjust our business model as a result. As well as being digital, we had to shift to being a lot more automated in our processes and our operations. So I'm happy to announce that we are almost nearly about probably 50% of the way done with being like 100% automated from an operations standpoint, and not just automated, but data driven in our automation, which is something unique that we're really trying to push in this space with the groups that we work with, which is primarily education, small business, and community driven organizations like nonprofits and government entities. And so in doing so, we've been really focused on what we can do to drive projects around data at scale. And so that includes innovation, which as a nonprofit, you don't see a lot of tech startup vibe in the nonprofit space. But we've started to meet other tech nonprofits that are doing the same thing we're doing and looking to drive innovation too as a nonprofit. And so it's a really exciting time to be in this space for sure. And post-COVID, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for the groups we work with to be more data driven, but also more automated in the way they operate.
That was a mouthful, and here's the whole thing. You said two major words that to me is probably my most curious, but also the weakest thing is data, right? Everyone has data. Everyone needs data for their business. And secondly is automation. I don't know how to automate to save my life. And I know Erin struggles to like get process down and nail it, right? So with what you're seeing with the clients that you're saying that had to shift as well to go more digital, are you seeing everyone more willing to automate now and get it? Or are you still educating on, guys, here's what really needs to happen?
Yeah, no, it's actually a tremendous opportunity because before COVID, I felt a lot of times like I was that chicken saying, you know, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, because I was always telling people to automate or die. You know, are you data driven? You know, what are you doing? And there was a lot of this pushback in some of the groups I work with that they weren't ready for these technologies, or they weren't there yet, or they just didn't trust them, period. And now there's not as much hesitation on that front. People are ready for it because they want their lives back. They're working from home, but they're not enjoying their quality of life because they're having to work more than ever. And I think that's probably something we're all seeing. And they're not just working more, they're working harder to do the same types of things they were doing face to face. So automation is a great way to really think about the processes within your business. And now, as a really process-driven data scientist, I get people begging me to tell them how to do that and how to create a data-driven automated business, because it makes it easier when we're talking about funding. Coming back to what we were talking about yesterday, when you're talking about being able to provide data to funders in a way that's easy without having to track down different points within your organization, it's a lot easier to do that when your data is automated and it's data driven rather than you just like pulling things from here and from there randomly.
So I have a question about nonprofits and governments and business. Have you seen an increase in interest? I don't want to be like all conspiracy theory or anything, but tracking, like, let's just, you know, have you seen an increase in people trying to figure out how to track, how to know? I mean, not just I know where you are, but tracking numbers, tracking data about, you know, COVID as an example. But our cities where before it was like, yeah, this is kind of the bottom of our importance list, where it's moved up tremendously.
Yeah, no, actually, that's pretty much all of our projects that we work on. We work on a lot of consulting projects in the data space that are scalable projects around consulting. And so we're not just trying to come in and tell them what's wrong. We're trying to teach them how to do it for the long term. And because of that, yeah, we've just finished a project with HHS on the national level. So we were working with the CDC and the FDA and all of the other big alphabet soup organizations that make up the HHS network, and really helping them actually work on the data for COVID. And these are people that work at the very highest levels of our government, and they're really struggling trying to figure out how to process their data, because even things like grant applications are coming in and they're having a hard time doing the same processes they were doing from a face-to-face standpoint. And so there's so much opportunity across the government right now. And I think that's something that we didn't really talk about yesterday much, but from a funding perspective, I don't think enough organizations take advantage of government contracting and RFPs as far as using the innovations they're already driving to figure out how they can solve problems that our organizations like government and education are having as well.
Wow. Well, so that's one thing I just haven't thought about, and I'm just full disclosure for me. This is, and Erin knows this all too well too, is this is like my weakest topic, right? So like for me, I've lived my life personally, not looking at seeking access to capital. I've always paid things in cash. If I couldn't afford it, then I just simply wouldn't buy it, right? And I would hold off. But being a business owner, it's a completely different mindset, right? It's a different mentality, and thinking about the government and, the way they can help and augment business today. Are you seeing, or do you think, you guys, are we as business owners leveraging, SBA, for example, enough, or is it something more like a last resort type thing for your business?
I think it's the last resort, because I talk to so many startup companies who have great technology that the government would just be so ready to grab from them and contract them to do for them. And there's so few of them that even consider going that route off as like an initial kind of proof of concept point. And I think that's really unfortunate. And that's one of the reasons that we have such an innovation gap, I think, right now in the government space. And so access to capital through groups like SBA gives you that kind of of inside look at the government. It gives you access to capital as well. And it doesn't come with strings tied to it in a lot of instances, the way that VC sometimes does. And so for me personally, I think it's more attractive to see how you can help community-driven organizations with your innovations that you're already creating first, and try to, you know, provide that proof of concept to then say, hey, now we want to go after some bigger funding opportunities. And we have this great proof of concept with the government that we did on this, and this project. And so I think it's a great way to get started. And government contracting opportunities range from, you know, a couple thousand to millions of dollars. So you can make a lot of money to really get your business kind of operational and also scale and have capital to scale with those opportunities.
And I think with the SBA, I feel like it's become the least sexy option out there, right? Like you know, Shark Tank has made this really cool, you need investors, you know, and we all talk about raising funds. It's how much did you raise, which doesn't matter, AKA Quibbly or whatever the hell that company's name was that just went under after trillions of dollars of raising. And we celebrate raises. Oh, they just raised $4 million. Okay. And I've said this 1,000 times. I don't care what you raise. What did you do with that money?
That's exactly right. I say the same thing about nonprofits. I mean, it makes me mad when we do the same thing. So it's not just the for-profit space. We're really bad at raising money and not telling people where it goes either. So we're a lot more alike than we care to admit, I think, on the nonprofit and the for-profit space. So I think that's very true. And I think the thing that he said yesterday that was really adamant or was really pertinent, because he said that your investor is a new boss. And I don't think enough people realize that when you take on all that VC money, you're taking on a bunch of new bosses. It doesn't matter how good your product is. If you have a bad boss in front of you, you're not going to get the same kind of return on that investment that you'd get if you had a good boss. And it's like dating. You don't really know who you're getting sometimes in the VC world. And if you get a lot of people funding you, that means a lot of bosses that you're going to have to cater to. And I see way too many people bending over backwards for VC where they can't really drive their business the way they want to.
Well, and I have a friend who used to work for one of the Shark Tank people, and he would help with the companies. And like, their expectations, they may not be a bad person either, like their boss, but they fund you, and their expectations and your expectations could be two totally different things. And like he said, your business for yourself to run your own thing, well, all of a sudden what you want to do and what they want you to do are two different things, and their money talks louder than your wishes, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to assess your personal risk too, I think, as part of that. And that's part of that personal risk is, you know, what do you have like going on within your business that's really going to support this relationship moving forward and make this relationship symbiotic and not more of a burden than a blessing.
Exactly. I think you really have to assess what you want, what they're bringing in, and do you want to sell yourself out a little bit or go the SBA route where you are still 100% owner? You just owe some money now to the government.
Yeah, and then it comes down to how much do you want to lose, and are you setting realistic expectations around how much money you want to bring in initially to get it off the ground? I mean, do you really need this money for you, or do you need this money to get a Tesla, like to take pictures with, to make it seem like your business is doing super amazing? Because
girl,
that's not what it is.
Every time the Tesla.
Yeah,
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So, okay. So in his book, so Ami Kassar's book, Growth Dilemma, he talked about that, what you mentioned, which is, okay, great. If you had $1 million, what would you do with it? How would you invest into it? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a great question because it's such a simple question. I was like, holy crap, what would I do? And, you know, would you invest in like a mutual fund, for example? Or if you put it into your business, what would you be doing for your business? Like, where would that money go? So do you guys feel like that statement when he said, if I had the money, it's holding people back? Yeah, because I think so. He said, I think sometimes having the money gets you too comfortable. And so I think it's actually better for you as a business owner to think creatively through
fundraising strategies around your business, and figure out how you can sustain capital. I mean, even us as a nonprofit, we're service driven. We don't rely on donations because of the fact that that's, it's just like going out and looking for VC. You're just hoping people will give you money for you just being you. And that doesn't always happen. And sometimes when they give you that money, they're a new boss. And we don't want that as a nonprofit either. So we drive through service, and we make money off of doing things for people like consulting. And there's not enough people willing to take what they have and make it into something profitable right now at this moment. Maybe it's just their idea, their concept, to be able to start funding that business themselves. Because to your point, you can, take out a small SBA loan, get everything rolling, and not have to worry about any additional funding down the road if you have a good way to start getting money in the door from the very beginning.
Well, and there's so many other factors too, that a lot of people think if I just had it's like with anything in life, if I lost the weight, I'd be happy. Or if I did this. So if I had $1 million, even though I really don't understand what I'm going to do with it, it just seems like the right number.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix my business. But there could be some crappy things of your business. Like your messaging could be off. Your product could be shit. Your poop. All of these things could be that $1 million can't fix.
$1 million can't fix it now.
Yeah. So like to Dr. Durr's point, like, are you looking at the things that you can control and can fix and like fixing those? Like I had a meeting with a client yesterday, and they want to build this whole big thing, pour all this money at it. And I know they're nervous to spend the money. And I said, before you spend the money, make sure this is something people want to buy. Like survey them, ask them, because the last place you want to be is thousands, millions, whatever in, and people going, I don't even want that. But you just thought it was, or your messaging was totally off, and you're just throwing money literally down a toilet. Not literally.
I mean, Quibi was a perfect example. They were trying to create this competing platform that no one asked for, and there was nothing unique in the value proposition, but yet there was an assumption. Okay, so let me bring this back to DataReady then. This was, Mark Katzenberg, David Katzenberg? These are smart people. Meg Whitman was the CEO they brought in. These are smart, experienced business professionals, investors, etc. How did they miss that mark so badly? What data do you think they were looking at? I mean, could you maybe, let's surmise this. What happened?
Okay, so this is, I feel like, the pandemic that exists in the startup world. And it's not just the startup world, it's the business world. I feel like they fell into the classic trap of falling in love with an ugly baby, which is what I call this process. And it is basically where you fall in love with your product. And I think one of the most important things, even to me as a nonprofit owner, you don't fall in love with your product. You don't fall in love with your business. You can love what you do for sure, but you don't fall in love with it to the point where you can't take criticism from anybody else. And I see way too many people with what seems like kind of a good idea initially, bring all these smart people into the picture and then not be willing to engage in a conversation about how they can actually go about improving what they have already and really driving it to make it what it needs to be in order to be, the market to meet the market conditions that it needs to meet. And I've even fallen into this before when working with people. And you try to give them insight about how to, make certain improvements here or do certain discovery there. They're not willing to do it. They think everything's great the way it is, and they want to go hit the ground running because they truly believe that it is what everyone else needs without really considering the opinions and thoughts of anyone else around them. And I think that's probably what happened here, because you bring all these smart people in the room, but if you're in love with your product just the way it is and you're not willing to adjust or make changes or grow, then your business is going to fail. And that's, personal data, but then it is also really doing that discovery on the front to really evaluate whether your product is market ready, whether the market is, even wants it to begin with, whether the form and format it's in is conducive to what people actually want to see and use. Like, what are you doing as a business owner to shift and be agile? And that comes down to being data driven in your approach. If you're data driven, then you're going to be catching those metrics immediately, and you're going to be able to go ahead and evaluate them and adjust your business as necessary. And if you're a good business owner, that's what you do. If you're the type of person that likes to go with the status quo, then you don't do that. You just do what you've been doing. And if it isn't broke, you don't fix it. You don't measure it. You don't track it. You just go with your gut. And I feel like Quibi was a go with my gut thing, and it failed because your gut is only so good. You might as well flip a coin and see if it's going to be good, because you can trust that gut so far, but sometimes your gut lies to you, and data doesn't lie. And so if you're measuring your performance of your site and it's not meeting your expectations, you should be agile enough to adjust. And you don't just bring all the big wigs in from the very beginning. Too many people do that. Those people aren't hungry. Those people aren't going to drive your business forward. People that are hungry are going to drive your business forward because they want to get a seat at the table. People that already have a seat at the table, it's like musicians. When you see a musician that's like struggling, they're always so much better than when they're like at their top peak performance and they're eating good and they have like a stable place to live. Like, it's never the same quality. And that's the same thing with a startup. I think you need those right people in the room that maybe don't know all the answers but are ready to learn. So there's a lot of pieces and moving parts of this whole story, I think, that caused it to be a failure.
Well, and a lot of with fundraising, you get names like that. I can guarantee you, Meg Wickman goes to her buddies and says, "I've got this business idea." They're not going to do their due diligence and look and see. Well, they got some millions to throw at her, and they don't care. You know, they trust. So a couple of people who fall in love with the ugly baby, and they just bring their friends along
to fall in love with that ugly baby too. Yeah, and that's basically everybody drinks the Kool-Aid, and that's where you end up.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we don't just pour money into ideas, even on the funding side. We really do a good job of proving a proof of concept. And I think that's where the government funding kind of comes back in, is because if you can get an RFP or a government contract to get funding for your project, even whatever condition it's in at that point, and you can get people to buy into your idea, then you can develop it out further on a much smaller, safer scale before you try to hit the ground running with the entire world. And I think too many people think that they don't understand that it's a slow and steady progression, and they try to go 0 to 100 and just expect the world to come. But we all know where Facebook started and where it is now are two very different things. And that's what a good business does. It grows with its users.
So this is totally an aside then. So just going back to what you said, and I'm just intrigued now, is we are entrepreneurs, we're startup folks. Do you think that we recognize we all are going to be successful? Let's just go ahead and assume this premise, because we are. Mm-hmm. Do you think we understand enough that there's a time and place for us? We're the hungry people. Maybe we're the ones that are starting and launching. And then when do you think we'll ever look at each other and say, okay, now I need to bring someone else in to do the maintenance or to do, the operational efficiency, et cetera? Do you think we have the data or the intelligence to recognize when that data is presented to us?
I think right now that's where data literacy kind of comes in, and that's where we kind of come in with our work, is that unfortunately, no, a lot of people don't understand data, and they've not kind of placed the right people in the right positions to be able to really easily engage with data in a way that makes sense for them. And so a lot of it is us as data people. We haven't done our due diligence, I think, about educating the general public on what we do, how we do it, why we do it. And so we have a big opportunity in front of us, anybody in the data space, whether you're an analyst, a scientist, or just a data enthusiast, because at this point, we have a huge gap in this country, and it's not just in the business world, it's in the public period. And I think we all saw it during COVID. People don't understand data. They don't understand really simple data. They don't understand how to engage with it or speak to it. And I think that's very evident in looking at not only the COVID response, but the elections we've had. People just don't understand any of it. And it's really evident, and it's really unfortunate, but it provides an opportunity for us to ask why and really investigate, some of the issues that we have within the data space, which I think are kind of an elitist problem. And then it's also just job security and stability. We want to know that we have a job, but I think we've been doing a disservice and not educating the community because we think that it's going to take our jobs away. But in fact, it's going to make our jobs easier and better, because right now we spend 90% of our time just cleaning up data because people don't understand it. And so they don't collect it correctly. And then they give it to us in this crummy format and expect us to, move mountains to make it clean and ready to go. And so we're used to working with ugly babies and making them pretty. And so that's kind of what we do best as data professionals. So it puts us in a unique space to be entrepreneurs, but it also means that we need to do a better job of educating others around what data is and why it says what it says and what that means to you and your role. And so we need to make it more accessible. We need to start with projects that are starting off at a point where people are when we work with people around data. And so if you're, if somebody needs to start in Excel and that's where they're comfortable, that's a place to start for someone. It's not a place to end, but it's a place to start. And so we need to be more due diligent about kind of starting people off at a place they're comfortable with and helping them learn about data. And so we come in, we consult, and we teach people how to use data within organizations. We don't just tell you what to do, we teach you how to do it. And then we help you with any strategic planning you have moving forward so that you're able to start the processes around it and start operationalizing this data collection so that it's not a burden to you either, because that's part of it. It's a burden to collect data sometimes, depending on where you're gathering it from. So that's another extra problem that we have. It's hard to understand. It's a burden to collect. People don't understand how it's being collected. They don't trust it. There's all these issues. And so we have to overcome all of that. So we have to teach.
No, I love that. And it's so funny. So Tyrone Butler, thank you for joining us. So we work with Ty at Map Esports, and it's another partner that Erin and I at Innovation Media have partnered up with to launch their podcast network. And Tyrone's on the back end side. And he makes a point, which something that we focus internally as entrepreneurs oftentimes is looking at that data. How do we do that automation and process? But the customer relationship, the voice of the customer is often ignored in that context as well, which is yet another dimension, if you will, stacking on top of, why it's imperative with that simple question of, should I look at funding? Should I look towards the SBA? Should I look at angel investments? Even before you even look to that, you got to look inside and say, okay, look at the state of my business. What is the data that I have currently presented for me to determine whether I can pursue this tract? Or does that mean before even I ask and look for money, do I need to get my processes in place? Do I understand that? And I think that's a great way to tie it all up, you guys, because we could talk about this forever, and I know we could because we have. Dr. Durr, thank you so much for joining us. Is there, how can we get a hold of you for those that want to learn more about DataReady DFW? The fact that you are a nonprofit leveraging technology in this space for data science and propagation and education. How can we get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Dr. Angel Durr. And you can also connect with me via email at director@datareadydfw.org. You can check us out online at datareadydfw.org. We're going through a website update, so some of it's not as current, but I'd be happy to connect with you if you have questions or want to engage in a conversation about anything data related within your organization or other organizations that we might be able to work with collaboratively. So I'm always open to talking to people.
Thank you very much, Dr. Durr. And Erin?
So all of this has been part of GLO, which stands for Global Leaders Organization, GLO. Usually we plug the content, but today I'll plug the capital side of it. So what we learned about was they have a whole arm helping but people looking for funding, help you figure out how to get money. And this is a premium member opportunity. So if you're in the Dallas area, hopefully you'll join Syya and myself. Otherwise, it is an international organization. You can head over with GLO, GLO, to check them out.
Excellent. And for next week, we are going to be welcoming Kara Golden. She's a founder and CEO of Hint. She is also a award-winning, I guess she's known for Hint water. It's an unsweetened flavored water. So that's very interesting. But she also is going to be talking about the concept of work-life balance, which we've all talked about, that elusive idea. And it's not just a standard, what is or can you achieve it? She really walks through on how to go from an executive to an entrepreneur and what that actually means and what that entails. So for those that are GLO members, just go to withglo.com and log into the member site and you'll get in. And for those that are not members and you're still trying to figure it out, you can see it live on Facebook and on YouTube. So without further ado, guys, have a safe weekend, and we will catch you next week for the Afterglow Live Recap podcast. Thank you.